Well, hello, and welcome to this episode of Unfair Advantage, where we explore the strategies, insights, and methodologies to give you an unfair advantage. I'm your host, Mona Hilton, CEO of Advantage Anywhere, and we're proud to bring you topics and guests that I believe will stretch your mind and grow your business. Now, if you've missed any of the amazing episodes of Unfair Advantage, or maybe you just want to binge watch on topics that will improve your business and life, check out the Unfair Advantage recordings at advantageanywhere.com/videos. And be sure to subscribe to our ever growing YouTube channel for the very latest in information, tips, and news on the hottest business topics and leadership topics. Now, everyone is looking to grow leads right now, but not just any leads, specifically financially qualified leads. And today we're going to have a conversation with Tripp Higgins. Tripp is the president of My Life Site. And we're going to talk with Tripp today about the challenges of finding financially qualified leads, why it's a challenge, and some ideas he has for how you can find financially qualified leads. And then what to do when you get a financially qualified leads. I believe this is one episode you're going to want to stick around for. So we're super excited to introduce you to Tripp Higgins. As I mentioned, he's the president of My Life Site. Welcome, Tripp.
Welcome, Mona. Thank you. This is a pleasure and certainly a welcome opportunity to be able to chat with you.
Yes, we are so looking forward to having this conversation with you and talking about financially qualified leads. So let's dive right in. So, Tripp, let's talk about solving the occupancy issue. As I mentioned, occupancy is quite an issue these days. How, in your opinion, do we go about solving that occupancy issue?
Well, it's ever evolving, and certainly with my decade or so of being a sales and marketing manager, and starting at the economic downturn in 2009, or kind of coming out of that 2007 crash, it is difficult to find and engage interested people in retirement living, and certainly those that believe that they can financially qualify. So the occupancy issue is somewhat like death and taxes. It never stops being an issue. It is a constant battle for any community. Attrition is real. So you always need to be on your game and always looking to the future as to who are your next community members.
Right. And as we were talking about earlier, it's very cyclical. And there, like you said, there's always attrition, so there's always a need for it. So we've kind of hinted at the term financially qualified lead. Tripp, in your opinion, why is having a financially qualified lead so important? And maybe it would help to also define a financially qualified lead.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I've referred to it lately as the FQL. You know, we've all been very familiar with your marketing qualified leads, your sales qualified leads. But then you're always looking for the holy grail of that sales qualified lead and then being financially qualified. And how do you find that out? It's usually not the easiest of conversations to have at the beginning of a sales cycle, or even in the education of your primary market area as to what is a financially qualified lead. We find that in many cases, people are hesitant about moving forward. So the more that we can help people understand what it means to be financially qualified and the financial fit that they have with the community, the better off we are.
Right. And, currently senior living does attempt to financially qualify their leads, but how do they do it traditionally?
Well, that was one of the first questions I asked when I got into the industry. I'm like, how do we know? And they're like, well, it's usually home value assets 2 times the entry fee, if it is an entry fee model, and their monthly service rate need to have at least 1.5 times income to kind of get somebody financially qualified. And that's obviously a very loose rule of thumb. It can work in some cases, but in many cases, it's not enough for a prospect to go, oh, great, sure, let me continue through this process until you tell me no. So it's not always an exact science, but we hope we've come up with a solution to make it much more of that, and
Mm-hmm.
one that's going to be an empowering experience for your primary market area.
Yeah, and that actually raises another good question. What are some of the other problems in the way that senior living is currently qualifying their leads financially? Is it time? Is it the dignity of the lead? What are some of the other issues with the way it's being done now?
Well, I think historically, no one really talks about finances much. It isn't a question. It's like, well, how much do you make? How much do you make? How much do you have in savings?
That's
And
awkward.
it tends to be very awkward. It is, however, very necessary within senior living to understand that. So we found if you can do it in a way that saves that dignity and helps engage with a prospect and certainly a primary market area to understand and fight against that notion that, oh, that community is far too nice. And what I heard from a friend of a friend is that you need to be, really wealthy to move in there. And what I'd always say, well, let us tell you that because we're the ones taking the risk on you. But outside of that, usually there are a number of different contract types and certainly a number of residential options. We actually had 3 contract types with 24 different styles. So I said, well, we have 72 different financial options. And I bet you we can find one that works with your finances. Yeah.
Mhm. Well, and also from the community standpoint, if you spend a lot of time with a lead only to find out that they're not financially qualified, that can be a waste of resources and time and energy, and then disappointment on both sides if it turns out that they can't afford it. Something
It's
you want to know earlier rather than later.
it's a great point because we certainly know a salesperson's time is much more than just their salary and benefits. It is really tied to the number of sales they can generate and what those sales mean to the future financial strength of the community. So in many cases, a salesperson's time could be worth thousands of dollars. But yet we do have a finite amount of time. And the salesperson has a year within that sales cycle to generate the 20 or 30 sales. So we want to make sure that they're being able to spend time with the most qualified and hence hopefully the most interested of prospects to move forward with the sales process and in many cases shorten that sales cycle because once you can establish the financial affordability, that sales cycle goes into a very different realm where you are now concentrating more on the intrinsic values of your community as opposed to having somebody have their brain tied up with, I don't know if I could afford this. And no matter what you say throughout that sales call, they keep thinking, I can't afford this. I can't afford this.
They're not listening to anything else.
Not listening. We've all seen that glassy-eyed look, and you're going, I'm not sure they're hearing anything anymore.
They're thinking about something else. And then, like you said, to do it in a way that is definitely efficient, but also preserves the dignity of the people involved and allows them to not have to spill their guts in front of a room full of people about what they own and what they can afford and what they can't afford.
Absolutely. We want this to be, and in many cases, this is one of the biggest decisions that somebody will make in their life. And you do want that to be a joyous one. You want that to be about discovering, enjoying, living, sharing, and celebrating life, not about the difficulty of understanding whether or not it is going to be part of their future.
Plus, they have so many other things to worry about. I mean, selling their home and all the other things that they worry about in moving in. You just want to take this off the table, so it's not something that is a concern that they have to worry about.
That is for sure. I know the first marketing piece I stepped into was 12 easy steps. And I was like, what is easy about 12 steps? Our average age is 84. I don't even know if I want to do 12 steps. But let's simplify that. And I think that the simpler we can make it, the easier it is for everybody involved.
Yeah. Yeah, and we'll talk about this later as we start talking about money gauge, but allowing people to do it from the comfort of their own home too. So it's a non-threatening environment. But anyway, one of the things that you mentioned earlier was financial hesitancy. I was hoping you kind of would define that for us a little bit and tell us what you believe the impact of financial hesitancy plays on ultimately occupancy.
Absolutely. It really sort of hit home for me a little more than 15 years ago, in a conversation I had with continued care actuaries and talking about the penetration rates of a primary market area, where they can average anywhere from 3 to 4% of your age and income qualified prospects. It's 3 to 4% of those people that choose to move to your community. So in terms of 100 people in your primary market area, you're looking at maybe 3 of those that will look to move in. And what happens to that 97, 96% that don't? Well, what we found is there's a large amount that are financially hesitant. And what that does is it doesn't allow them to engage, with your invites, your mailers, any type of program or event that you're using as an educational and also sort of a matchmaking process. Because financial hesitancy is real. We all have lived it in different phases in our lives as to what can I afford, what can I not. It's kind
Definitely.
of the difference. Do I buy the Ninja food processor, or do I go with, the more expensive brand? So the Vitamix is what I was looking for. Yeah. So a lot of people go, I don't know if I can afford any of them, and then they just don't do anything.
Right.
Where that's sort of the worst decision is, and certainly with these economic times, not making a decision is unfortunately something we'd like to have them avoid and give them more options and opportunity. And not
Yeah. I love what you just said too, because I remember hearing one time that your biggest competitor is not who you think it is. Your biggest competitor is the do nothing competitor. And that's something that you've got to plan for. And so making sure that you take that off the table, the financial qualification is we may never be able to measure or gauge, if you will, the impact of that.
Oh, it is game changing. That is for sure.
Mhm.
When somebody knows that they can afford it, great things happen. Now, I
Mhm.
had a wonderful story. A gentleman and his wife, who she suffered from memory issues. He was a life insurance salesperson, and as we were looking through and walking through the community, he got quite emotional and wasn't sure. I wasn't sure necessarily what was going on, and in taking him aside, he just didn't think he could afford it, and it was the one thing he wanted to be able to give to his wife, is that comfort of moving to a community and living a life where they could share it together as much as they could. So we went back to my office, and then were able to run numbers through another system to kind of let him know that it does look like you're a good financial fit. And I had to physically show that to him, and we walked through that process. And it really became evident to me that the more we could try to do that with people, the easier that we could move through, our sales cycle and make it easier for them to make that decision as to whether or not moving to our community is the best for their future.
Oh, that's a great story. I love that. And like you said, I think we've all been there, and it's you just assume that you can't. That's your natural inclination, is to say, no, I can't. I'm not even going to look at it. Whereas, like you said, being able to see the numbers is an eye opener, if you will.
Yeah, I mean, a 3% penetration rate is difficult
Mhm.
to maintain, 100% or 95+% occupancy. If you can
Mhm.
engage 1 to 2 more percent of that marketplace, your occupancy issues are greatly reduced.
Mhm.
You have a robust waiting list.
Awesome. So I know that many people know this, but you have created a solution for that you call Money Gauge. Would you mind
Correct.
taking a moment to tell us a little bit about Money Gauge, why it was created, and a little bit about how it works?
Sure. Well, certainly, my life site and the evolution has always been about educating the consumer and helping the community. And certainly one of the biggest pain points was, how do you help engage with a financially qualified lead, but helping them realize that they can be financially qualified. Now, we have a tool that you can do that, but it's very detailed, and it's usually a one-on-one experience. So Money Gauge was something that can be put onto your website. The link can be texted, you can email it, you can put it into a mail piece, with the QR code and help people do it at their own time and within the comfort of their own home or wherever it is that they feel most comfortable in filling out these 7 questions, right? So we look at the holy grail of a sales qualified and financially qualified lead is your age, your home value, your assets, your Social Security, your pension, of course, which is your income, and then whether or not you have long-term care insurance. Because we have the ability to now sit it on somebody's website and have a call to action, we then take those questions and we relate it to an actuarial table of life expectancy. That's extremely important because people can have a 5-year, 10-year, 20-year lifespan, if not more. We then allow communities to pick different economic assumptions, whether you're looking at interest rates, you're looking at earnings on investments, you're looking at increases in Social Security payments each year. From there, we then look at potential years of care. And all of these, it sounds very complicated, but we do all that calculation in the back end. And then we can adjust for each community's financial risk tolerance or sort of to start out at the low end of their financial qualification. And MoneyGauge has created incredible results. The last year, we looked at just about 100,000 assessments, and our conversion rate was just over 32%. So we defined assessments as somebody that answers those 7 questions. That information is then stored in our system. It's shared, and you have access to that. When someone then answers those questions and gives you their name and email, and in many cases a phone number, that is what we call a conversion, because now you have a prospect. And they've usually then written a rather lengthy note as to how they'd like to be contacted, why they're contacting you, and what they're looking for. And from there, the numbers have just been amazing. And you look at out of every 100 assessments you take, you're going to have 32 people on average filling out their name, email, and phone number. From there, that's where engaging with companies like yours as to how do we help the sales force continue on with that lead and the best practices to essentially close that in a shorter sales cycle, be more efficient, and everybody wins.
No, that's great. A couple of things that stood out to me there is that one, they're self-qualifying. So if they, as you call it, convert, they give their contact information, they are comfortable that they can qualify. And also the sales team has the information that they can bring back and present back to them in a way that helps them advance the sale, as we call it. That's really great. And I think from a standpoint of getting these qualified leads, it makes the salespeople more comfortable and less hesitant to pick up the phone and call them and to help them through that process, because they don't have that doubt in their head either. And that's why I love what we're doing together, our companies, in that we kind of guide that salesperson through what they need to do in order to advance that sale.
There's no doubt about it. And engagement is the name of the game, right? Every community
Definitely.
is spending incredible amounts of money on digital advertisement, and you can get somebody to your website, but you really want them to then engage. And how do you get them to a tour? How do you get them to a visit? In many cases, we've taken away that silent barrier, right? It's the elephant in the room. Can I afford this? By being able to engage, we not only now have educated them on what residential options are affordable, and hopefully it is all of them. And from there, we find that that's a very empowered lead. It is the holy grail. You've got all the financial information, and our tool actually gives you a cash flow statement that shows you how that works. So in many cases, if a prospect is more concerned about their financial legacy and what they are able to give away or give back to their family, this is an incredible way to showcase exactly how they fit into your community. And we're excited to share it with more communities. And that's the great way and how we connected. A mutual customer that was using it and said, the first thing we need to do is integrate MoneyGauge with Advantage Anywhere.
Well, and also the reverse of that is also true. If they're not qualified and they self-qualify themselves as not being qualified, then neither they or your sales team is investing a lot of time only to be disappointed or discouraged or maybe even embarrassed that they're not a good fit. So that, like you said, they are really focusing on the high value prospects who are most likely to convert into a tour and a deposit and of course a move-in.
Yeah, I mean, you make a great point there. And I sort of, how does a salesperson want to start their day, right? In essence, of buying a lead list is kind of like, if I'm asking somebody to help me make an apple pie, do they want the bushel of apples and they need to pick from to find the best 20? Or would they rather have those 20 washed and sliced and ready to be put into the pie? And essentially, that's where we look at Money Gauge is washing those apples, figuring out what are the best 20, to help you make it easier to complete a sale and to complete the sales cycle. Yeah, and certainly we've all spent incredible amounts of time with people that weren't financially qualified, and we know that's not something we want to be doing every day.
Right. I love that analogy. That's great. I might steal it.
Feel
That's
free.
great. So Tripp, that's been wonderful. I love all the things that we talked about, and there's just so many nuggets in there. I was just kind of mentally making note of some of the ones that I thought were really good. But I guess my question to you is, if someone is watching this podcast or listening to it later, and there's one thing that you want them to take away, one thing you want them to remember, one point you want to make sure you state, is what would that be, do you think?
It's hard to boil that down.
It's a loaded question, I know.
And we do as a company, love helping people help people. Yeah, but I would say that the one thing we do is we just help make the sales journey easier for the prospect and for the salesperson. Money Gauge is working 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. And it's just a tool that isn't a hindrance. It's actually that wonderful piece that makes your morning coffee that much more enjoyable when you look through the leads you're going to be starting your day with. So I guess it would be making the sales journey easier. Being from that business and knowing that difficulty that it can take, and the amount of time, and the power of listening and being able to try to figure out how you can make that decision easier. This is one of those tools that makes it a lot easier.
Yeah, I love that. And I would also add to that, adding confidence into that process, because again, both parties have confidence that it's going to work out.
We could talk forever. Absolutely. That is, if a salesperson isn't confident about the prospect's affordability, that shows. If the prospect isn't confident about whether or not they feel they can move into that community, it slows everything down, and it's hard to get through that. Yeah. No, Mona, I've always learned something, and I love the conversations we have. This is fantastic.
Same here, Tripp. I've loved every conversation we've had too. Like you said, we first started working with this client, and we started talking initially, and I'm like, we're on the same wavelength, and I really enjoy our conversations, and I appreciate them. And I'm sure our audience enjoyed listening to it. I mean, like you said, we could probably talk for hours. Actually, we have talked for hours, but we won't record all of it today. But
who's keeping track?
Yeah. So who's counting? So if you guys want to connect with Tripp, I highly encourage you to. His contact information is on the screen right now. As I mentioned, he is the president of My Life site. His email address is on there, and of course, connect with him on LinkedIn. You'll be glad you did, and I'm sure you'd be willing to show them Money Gauge as well, right, Tripp?
Absolutely. It's one of life's passions for me. So
of course, I expected that. And if you guys would like to connect with me for any reason, or if you have any questions, or you want to learn more about Advantage Anywhere, my contact information is on the screen as well. So thank you, everyone. Thank you so much, Tripp. It's been a pleasure, as always, to talk to you. And thank you guys for participating in this episode of Unfair Advantage. And we look forward to seeing you on the next episode. Thanks, and have a great day.
Thank you, Mona. Take care.